When I first met Emily, it felt like my life had finally clicked into place. She had this warmth about her, kind eyes, a radiant smile, and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. It wasn't long before I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. Our wedding was the stuff of dreams. A quiet ceremony overlooking a serene lake in upstate New York. Surrounded by friends and family, we promised to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of our lives. I truly believed we were building a love story that could rival any fairy tale. The first few years were everything I'd hoped for. Emily and I moved into a charming little house with a white picket fence in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. She loved gardening, and I'd watch her from the porch on weekends, marveling at how lucky I was. We spent evenings laughing over home-cooked meals, took spontaneous road trips, and made a million plans for the future. When Emily told me she was pregnant, I was over the moon. We cried tears of joy as we held each other in the kitchen, imagining all the milestones to come. The first steps, the first words, the family vacations. Our son, Ethan, was born on a crisp autumn morning, and I remember holding his tiny hand in mine, promising him the world. The early days of parenting were exhausting but magical. Emily was a natural. She doted on Ethan, sang him lullabies at night, and captured every precious moment on her phone. I did my part, too, changing diapers, pacing the floor during sleepless nights, and working extra hours to ensure our little family had everything we needed. For years, life was good. No, it was perfect. Or so I thought. Started small. At first, I didn't think much of it. An unfamiliar perfume that lingered when Emily came home late from girls' night, or a text notification she'd quickly dismiss with a casual, "Oh, just Nicole from work." But the doubts began to creep in, and I had no idea the storm that was about to tear my perfect life apart. At first, I ignored the signs. Why wouldn't I? Emily and I had built a life together, one filled with laughter, love, and trust. But as the months went by, those tiny, nagging doubts started to add up. The perfume was the first thing. Emily had always worn the same floral scent since the day we met. It was her signature, a comforting reminder of her presence. But now there were other scents, bold, musky, unfamiliar ones, that clung to her when she returned from work or her outings with friends. "It's just a sample someone at the office gave me," she said with a laugh when I asked. "I thought I'd try something new." I nodded, brushing it off. Of course, she'd want to experiment with new things. That was Emily. Vibrant, ever-changing, always full of surprises. Then came the late nights. She'd always been busy, working as a marketing manager for a big firm downtown. But now there were more meetings, more dinners, more networking events. She'd text me around 10 or 11 p.m., saying she was just finishing up, or grabbing a drink with clients. I'd reply with a simple, "Okay, be safe, love you," and go to bed, convincing myself this was just part of her career ambitions. But something was different. She was glued to her phone more than ever, her smile faltering when I'd glance over her shoulder. Her once excited chatter about her day became vaguer, punctuated with a lot of, "Oh, nothing much," or "You wouldn't find it interesting." There were missed dinners, forgotten plans, and a growing distance between us that I couldn't explain. One night, after she'd claimed to be working late again, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a cold plate of spaghetti I'd made for her. Ethan was already asleep, his stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. I looked at the empty chair across from me and felt a hollow ache I couldn't quite name. When she came home hours later, her hair slightly disheveled, I finally asked, "Are you okay? You've been so busy lately." She froze for a second before plastering on a smile. "Of course I'm okay, honey. Work's just been crazy, that's all. It'll settle down soon." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, at least I tried. But the doubts kept creeping in, and deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The first real crack appeared on a Saturday morning. Emily was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something about the constant pinging caught my attention. I glanced over, my heart skipping a beat as I saw the name, Brandon. The message preview read, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was this some kind of mistake? A prank? A misunderstanding? Emily stepped out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel, humming softly. I quickly looked away from the phone, my hands trembling. Everything okay? She asked, pulling a sweater over her head. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just checking an email. But for the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the message. Who was Brandon? What had happened last night? That evening, after Ethan was asleep, I brought it up casually. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Do you know someone named Brandon? Her reaction was subtle but telling. Her hand froze mid-reach for her glass of water, and her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. Oh, Brandon, she said, her voice a touch too casual. He's a new guy at work. Why? No reason, I said quickly, backing off. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and no amount of her reassurances could erase the unease growing inside me. The perfume returns. Over the next few weeks, the late nights continued, as did the new perfume. She laughed it off when I mentioned it again. It's just another sample, Jake. You're overthinking it, she said, kissing my cheek. But I wasn't overthinking it. I could feel the shift, the widening gap between us. One night, I decided to pick her up from the office as a surprise. I texted her just before leaving, and her reply came almost immediately. Oh no, I'm already on my way home. Next time. I stopped at a red light, staring at her text. Something didn't add up. If she was already on her way home, why hadn't I passed her? When I got home, her car wasn't in the driveway. An hour later, she finally walked through the door, her hair slightly messy and a faint whiff of that unfamiliar perfume clinging to her clothes. I stopped by Nicole's place for a quick drink, she said, dropping her bag by the door. I nodded, trying to mask my disappointment. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right, and soon, I would find out the truth. Far worse than I could have imagined. The turning point came a week later. I was tucking Ethan into bed when he asked, "Why doesn't Mommy like to have dinner with us anymore?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I stammered out something about how Mommy was working hard and trying to make things better for us. But as I turned off his night light and left the room, I couldn't shake the lump in my throat. That night, Emily came home later than usual, claiming she had stayed back for a last-minute meeting. But her story didn't add up. Her lipstick was smudged, her blouse wrinkled, and the faint scent of whiskey clung to her like a confession. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I started paying attention. The clues began to add up. It wasn't long before the signs became impossible to ignore. Her phone, once left casually on the counter or bedside table, was now glued to her hand, always face down. Her social calendar, once filled with outings I knew about, now included vague work events and catch-ups with friends whose names I'd never heard before. And then there was Brandon. His name popped up on her phone again, this time in a notification for a calendar event labeled Lunch with B. I told myself it could still be innocent. After all, people from work often had lunch together, right? But I couldn't let it go. One night, after Emily had fallen asleep, I crept into the living room and opened her laptop. My hands shook as I typed in her password, a combination I knew from years of shared accounts. When the screen unlocked, my heart sank. Her email was open, and at the top of the inbox was a message from someone named Evan. The subject line read, "Miss you already." With trembling hands, I clicked on it. "Evan, last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. Let's plan for this weekend? Emily, can't wait. Same place as before?" I stared at the screen, my chest tightening as realization dawned. It wasn't just Brandon. There was another man. Emily was seeing two people behind my back. The betrayal burned like acid in my stomach. I wanted to scream, to wake her up and demand answers, but I knew I needed more. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it, twist it, and make me feel like I was the one imagining things. I needed proof, and I was going to get it. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table, watching Emily as she laughed with Ethan. Her radiant smile, the same one that had once been my world, now felt like a mask hiding the truth. I forced myself to act normal, to tuck away the storm of anger and heartbreak swirling inside me. "I've got a late meeting tonight," she said casually, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Work keeping you busy as always," I replied, keeping my tone even. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. After she left, I called my best friend, Ryan. Ryan had always been my sounding board, the person I turned to when life got complicated. "Jake, this is serious," Ryan said after I laid everything out. "If you're right, you need proof. Solid proof. Otherwise, she'll gaslight you into thinking you're crazy." I hated the idea of spying on Emily. It felt wrong, invasive, but I couldn't let her lies destroy me. I needed to know the truth. The GPS tracker. That afternoon, I bought a small GPS tracker and discreetly attached it to Emily's car. It was simple enough to monitor through an app on my phone. If she was really going to work late, the tracker would confirm it. If she wasn't, well, I'd know. That night, as she kissed me goodbye and headed out, I waited anxiously for the tracker to update. Her car didn't head toward the office. Instead, it went to a high-end hotel on the other side of town. My stomach churned as I watched the little dot on the map settle there. Maybe it's a work event, I told myself weakly. But deep down, I knew better. I drove to the hotel, parking a block away and watching from a distance. A few minutes later, I saw her step out of her car, dressed in a sleek black dress I hadn't seen before. She wasn't alone. A man walked up to her. A tall, clean-cut guy who looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. He put his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the entrance. It was Brandon. My hands clenched the steering wheel as I fought the urge to confront them right then and there. But I forced myself to stay put. I needed more than just my word against hers. I took photos with my phone, each snap driving the dagger of betrayal deeper into my heart. When they disappeared into the hotel, I drove home, my mind racing with a mix of anger and disbelief. I thought about Ethan, sleeping peacefully in his room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in our family. He didn't deserve this, but I wasn't done. I couldn't stop until I knew everything. The hotel incident confirmed what I had feared. Emily was cheating, but my gut told me there was more to the story. My discovery of the email from Evan still gnawed at me. Was she seeing him too? I waited for Emily's next late-night excuse. It came a few days later when she casually mentioned another work dinner. "That's fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'll take care of Ethan." She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me, and left with a bright smile, as if she hadn't just shattered my trust. Once she was gone, I checked the GPS tracker. This time, her car didn't head downtown. Instead, it stopped at a restaurant on the outskirts of the city. A different location, but I wasn't surprised. I drove out, parking discreetly across the street. Peering through the restaurant windows, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting in a dimly lit corner booth, laughing with a man whose hand rested casually on hers. This man wasn't Brandon. It was Evan, the man from the email. Unlike Brandon, Evan had a rugged, laid-back vibe. He leaned toward Emily, his body language intimate and familiar. They shared a bottle of wine, their faces close enough to look like a couple celebrating an anniversary. I snapped more photos, my chest tightening with each click of the camera. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. Two men, two separate lives. How long had this been going on? When I got home, I pored over the photos and emails I had collected. It was all there, the meetings, the secret messages, the intimacy. Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was living a double life. The confrontation looms. The next morning, as Emily sat across from me at breakfast, her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Evan. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." Emily casually swiped the notification away, but not before I saw the faint smile tugging at her lips. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah," she replied, not even looking up. My blood boiled, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be strategic. If I acted out of anger, she'd find a way to deflect or manipulate the situation. Instead, I began planning. I had enough evidence now to expose her lies, but I wanted to make sure she couldn't wiggle out of this. By the end of the week, I had a plan in place. Emily thought she was playing me, but she was about to find out just how much I knew. The betrayal festered inside me, a constant ache that wouldn't go away. Every smile Emily gave me, every affectionate touch, felt like a performance, a cruel mockery of the love we once had. But I held it together, focusing on my plan. It was time to confront her, but I needed her lies to unravel in real time, where she couldn't deny the evidence staring her in the face. I arranged for Ethan to stay with my sister for the weekend. Just a little time to ourselves, I told Emily when I dropped him off. She seemed pleased, her demeanor almost casual, as if she didn't suspect a thing. That night, I waited until Emily left for another one of her meetings. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I opened the GPS app and watched her destination unfold. The tracker led her back to the hotel where she'd met Brandon before. This time I followed. The hotel revelation. I arrived just as Emily and Brandon walked into the hotel lobby together, their hands brushing in a way that made my stomach churn. I stayed in my car, letting them get comfortable before stepping inside. The concierge was a young man who barely looked up from his desk as I approached. "Excuse me," I said, slipping him a $50 bill. "My wife forgot to give me the room number. Can you tell me where Emily Harper is staying?" He hesitated but eventually caved, whispering the number to me. "Room 312. My hands shook as I rode the elevator up. When I reached the door, I could hear muffled laughter from inside, Brandon's voice unmistakable. I took a deep breath and knocked. The laughter stopped. A moment later, Emily opened the door, her expression turning from surprise to panic in an instant. "Jake?" she stammered, her face pale. "What are you doing here?" Before she could slam the door, I pushed my way in. Brandon stood by the bed, looking just as stunned as she was. "So," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "this is what your late nights have really been about." "Jake, it's not what it looks like," Emily blurted out, her words tumbling over each other. Brandon stayed silent, his hands raised slightly, as if trying to signal he wanted no part in the brewing storm. "Oh, really?" I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn clear." Emily's face crumpled, her defenses faltering. But I wasn't done. "This isn't just about him," I said, glaring at her. "I know about Evan too." Her eyes widened in shock. "What?" she whispered. "That's right," I continued, my voice rising. "I've seen the messages, the meetups. You've been lying to me for months, maybe even longer." The room fell into a heavy silence. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Brandon, sensing the tension, grabbed his jacket and bolted for the door. "You should go," I told him coldly. He didn't hesitate. When the door clicked shut, Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Jake, I can explain." "Explain," I interrupted, my voice thick with anger. "You've been living a double life, Emily. What could you possibly say to fix this?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. The woman I had built my life with, the mother of my child, had destroyed everything we had. And now there was no turning back. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. I stood across the room, my arms crossed, every muscle in my body tense. I'd thought confronting her would bring some sense of clarity, but all it did was fill the air with a suffocating silence. Finally, she spoke. "Jake, I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice shaky. I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean for it to happen? So what? Brandon and Evan just accidentally fell into your life? You accidentally started lying to me, sneaking around, breaking our vows." She flinched but didn't respond. I stepped closer, my anger rising. "How long, Emily? How long have you been seeing them?" Her shoulders slumped. "It started 6 months ago," she admitted. "Brandon was first. He's someone I met through work." "And Evan?" I demanded, Her voice cracked. A few months later, the weight of her confession hit me like a sledgehammer. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. This had been deliberate, ongoing. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Was I not enough for you? Was our life not enough? Emily looked up at me, her tear-streaked face filled with desperation. It wasn't about you, Jake. It was me. I felt trapped, like I'd lost who I was. I needed to feel alive again. Her words stung more than I could have imagined. Alive, I repeated, my voice hollow. You have a husband who loves you, a son who adores you, a life we built together, and that wasn't enough? You needed them to feel alive. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I was stupid, selfish, and I hate myself for it. You don't get to hate yourself, I snapped. You don't get to make yourself the victim here. I trusted you, Emily. I gave you everything. The tears flowed freely now, but they didn't move me. My anger, my pain, overshadowed any pity I might have felt. I need some air, I said, turning toward the door. Jake, please. But I didn't let her finish. I walked out of the room, letting the door slam behind me. An unexpected revelation. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what had just happened. My mind kept replaying her words, her excuses, her tears. Every memory of our life together felt tainted now, a lie woven into the fabric of our marriage. Eventually, I parked at a quiet overlook outside of town, staring at the city lights below. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But when I saw the caller ID, my heart skipped a beat. It was Ryan. Jake, are you okay? He asked, his voice filled with concern. Not really, I admitted. I confronted her. She admitted to everything. Brandon, Evan, all of it. There was a long pause on the other end before Ryan spoke again. Jake, there's something you need to know. I frowned. What is it? I didn't want to tell you this unless I was sure, but I think there's more to this than what Emily's told you. My grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? I've seen her, Jake. Places she shouldn't be. With people who aren't Brandon or Evan. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I think there's a third guy, Ryan said quietly. The words hung in the air, heavy and crushing. The third man. Ryan's words hit me like a freight train. A third man? Could Emily's betrayal go even deeper than I thought? You're sure about this? I asked, my voice low and strained. I didn't want to believe it at first, Ryan said. But I saw her last week at the Monarch Cafe. She was with someone else, a guy I didn't recognize. They were sitting in the back, talking close, like they were together. My jaw tightened. Did you get his name? No, Ryan admitted. But I could find out. I'll dig into it if you want. I wanted to say no, to stop this nightmare from spiraling further. But the truth had become an obsession. I had to know just how far Emily's lies went. Do it, I said. Let me know what you find. After I hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, staring out at the city lights. The third man. It felt like every shred of trust I'd ever had in Emily was crumbling away, leaving nothing but anger and betrayal in its wake. When I finally went home, the house was dark. Emily had gone to bed, and I didn't bother waking her. Instead, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying Ryan's words over and over. The breakthrough. A few days later, Ryan called again. I found him, he said without preamble. Who is he? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. His name's Tyler, Ryan replied. He's a fitness trainer at that gym Emily joined a few months ago. I checked her social media, and there's a few photos where he's tagged. Nothing incriminating, but it lines up. My stomach twisted. The gym. Another part of her life I thought was innocent, now tainted with suspicion. Ryan continued. I went by the gym earlier today. They were there together, talking by the front desk. She laughed at something he said and touched his arm. It didn't look like a professional relationship. I thanked Ryan and hung up, my mind racing. Emily had woven a web of deceit so intricate, I wasn't sure where it ended. That evening, as Emily sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I decided to test her. "How's the gym been?" I asked casually, sitting down across from her. Her eyes flicked up briefly before returning to her screen. "It's good. I've been trying out some new classes. Do you know a trainer named Tyler?" Her reaction was subtle but damning. Her hand froze for a split second, and she quickly looked away, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, he's one of the instructors," she said lightly. "Why?" "No reason," I said, my heart pounding. Her smile seemed too forced, too rehearsed. That night, I checked the GPS tracker again. She wasn't going to the gym. She was meeting Tyler at a downtown restaurant. I didn't follow her this time. I didn't need to. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they painted was worse than I could have imagined. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was living a double or maybe even triple life, and it was time for her to face the consequences. I couldn't carry the weight of it anymore. Brandon, Evan, Tyler. Each name was a betrayal. Each lie another crack in the foundation of our marriage. I had to confront Emily not just for me, but for Ethan, for the family we were supposed to be. The next evening, I waited for her in the living room. The divorce papers I'd printed sat on the coffee table, along with the photos I'd taken at the hotel, the restaurant, and the emails I'd pulled from her laptop. Emily walked through the door, cheerful and chatty. "Hey, sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful," she said, setting her bag down. "Sit down, Emily," I said, my voice cold and steady. She froze, sensing the shift in my tone. "Jake? What's wrong?" "Just sit," I repeated. Reluctantly, she sat across from me, her eyes flickering to the papers on the table. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "This," I said, gesturing to the pile, "is the truth. The truth about Brandon, about Evan, about Tyler." Her face went pale. "Jake, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Explain why you've been lying to me for months? Why you've been sneaking around with not one, not two, but 3 men while I stayed home, raising our son and believing in you." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. "Don't lie to me, Emily. I know everything. I've seen the emails, the texts, the photos. I've tracked your car. For God's sake, don't you dare sit there and pretend you didn't do this." Her shoulders slumped, and tears filled her eyes. "Jake, I didn't mean to hurt you." "I didn't mean to hurt me?" I interrupted, incredulous. "Do you think that makes it better? You've destroyed us, Emily. You've destroyed everything." The tears spilled over, but they didn't move me. "Not this time. I felt trapped," she said, her voice breaking. "I felt like I'd lost myself. I didn't know how to tell you." "So instead of talking to me, you went to them?" I asked, my voice thick with anger and disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done? To me? To Ethan?" Her head dropped into her hands, and she sobbed quietly. I stood up, pacing the room to keep from losing control. "I thought we had something real, Emily. I thought we were building a life together. Was any of it real? Or was it all just a lie?" "It wasn't a lie," she whispered, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I loved you, Jake. I still do." "Don't," I said, shaking my head. "Don't you dare say you love me. Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't rip someone apart the way you've ripped me apart." I grabbed the divorce papers from the table and thrust them toward her. "It's over, Emily. Sign these and we'll figure out a way to co-parent Ethan. But as far as I'm concerned, our marriage is done." She stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "Jake, please," she begged. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I don't want to lose you." "You already have," I said quietly. The words hung in the air, final and unyielding. The days following our confrontation were a blur of tension and quiet devastation. Emily tried to talk to me more than once, but I refused to engage. She had made her choices, and I couldn't let her pull me back into her web of lies. I focused on Ethan, pouring all my energy into being the best father I could. He was too young to understand the cracks forming in our family, but his little questions, "Why is mommy so sad?" Or "Why don't we eat dinner together anymore?" stabbed at my heart. Emily, for her part, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. She cooked meals, played with Ethan, and kept up appearances, but the weight of our crumbling marriage hung heavy over the house. One evening, as I was tucking Ethan into bed, he asked a question that stopped me cold. "Daddy, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Mommy and we're going through something, buddy," I said carefully. "But we both love you very much. That will never change." He nodded solemnly, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Okay." As I left his room, I felt the crushing weight of the situation pressing down on me. This wasn't just about me and Emily anymore. It was about Ethan and the life we'd built for him, a life that was unraveling because of her choices. Emily's plea. That weekend, Emily cornered me in the kitchen as I was making coffee. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is there to talk about?" I replied, not looking at her. "Everything," she said, stepping closer. "I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed your trust. But I need you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." I turned to face her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Fix this? How do you fix cheating on me with 3 different men? How do you fix lying to my face for months?" She flinched but held her ground. "I'll go to therapy. I'll end everything with them, Brandon, Evan, Tyler. All of it. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I want this marriage." I shook my head. "Emily, this isn't just about you ending those affairs. It's about the fact that you started them in the first place. You made me question everything. Our love, our life, who you are. I don't even know you anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. "You do know me, Jake. I'm still the woman you married, the mother of your child. I lost my way." "You lost more than that," I said coldly. "You lost my trust. And without that, there's nothing left." She broke down, sobbing into her hands. I wanted to feel something, sympathy, forgiveness, but all I felt was emptiness. "Sign the papers, Emily," I said quietly. "It's over." She didn't respond, just sank to the floor as her sobs echoed through the kitchen. Moving forward. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer to finalize the divorce proceedings. Emily didn't fight me on custody. She knew Ethan needed stability, and right now I was the only one who could provide that. But just as I thought the worst was behind me, an email arrived in my inbox that would change everything. It was from Brandon. The subject line read, "You should know the truth." I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding. Inside was a single sentence. Emily wasn't the only one hiding things, and attached were photos of her, of Evan, and of Tyler. But the final photo was the one that made my blood run cold. It was me, sitting at a cafe with Ryan. The photo stared back at me, an unassuming snapshot of Ryan and me sitting at a cafe just weeks ago. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Why would Brandon have this? Why was it included with the other photos of Emily's affairs? Beneath the photo was a message. "I thought you should know. Your friend Ryan's been in on this the whole time. He helped her keep it from you. Ask her if you don't believe me." The words felt like a slap to the face. Ryan, my closest friend, the person I turned to for advice, the one who had helped me uncover the truth about Emily, was involved? It didn't make sense. I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Ryan's apartment. The confrontation with Ryan. He opened the door, surprised to see me. "Jake? What's going on?" I shoved the phone in his face, showing him the email. "What the hell is this, Ryan? Why does Brandon think you were involved in Emily's affairs?" His expression shifted from confusion to something darker. Guilt. "Jake, I can explain," he stammered, stepping back. "Then start explaining," I snapped, stepping into his apartment. "Because right now, it looks like you've been playing me this whole time." Ryan sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Jake. I swear. I didn't want to hurt you." "Didn't want to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice rising. You knew about this? About Brandon, Evan, Tyler? How long, Ryan? How long have you been lying to me? He hesitated before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. Since the beginning. The words hit me like a freight train. She told me about Brandon months ago, he admitted. She said she was in over her head and needed someone to cover for her. She begged me, Jake. Said she'd end it if I helped her keep it quiet. I thought I was helping her fix things. You thought you were helping? I spat. How the hell does lying to me help anyone? Ryan buried his face in his hands. I didn't know about Evan or Tyler until later. By then, I didn't know how to tell you. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? I yelled. You let me think I was losing my mind, Ryan. You let me question myself, my marriage, everything. Because you were covering for her? I didn't know what else to do, he said, his voice shaking. She told me if you found out, it would destroy everything. I thought I was doing the right thing. I stared at him, disbelief and rage bubbling inside me. The right thing? You betrayed me, Ryan. You're as bad as she is. He didn't try to defend himself. Just sat there in silence as I turned and walked out the door. The final decision. When I got home, Emily was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Jake, she started, but I held up a hand to stop her. I know about Ryan, I said flatly. Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch. He was just trying to help. Don't, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't you dare defend him. Or yourself. You've both done enough damage. She didn't respond, just sat there in silence. I picked up the divorce papers from the table and placed them in front of her. This ends now, Emily. You'll sign these tonight, or I'll take this to court and make sure you lose everything. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I don't care, I said coldly. As she signed her name, I felt a strange sense of relief. This chapter of my life, this nightmare, was finally ending. But as I watched her leave the room, I couldn't shake the hollow ache in my chest. The people I trusted most had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. Now it was just me and Ethan, and I was determined to give him the life he deserved, even if it meant starting over from nothing.